Hey, thanks everyone for coming here. So we're going to be presenting a new application called BankerX, which is a combination of Morphir and FDC3. So we'll do a quick introduction.
All right, I'm Stephen Goldbaum, distinguished engineer at Morgan Stanley and one of the co-founders of Morphir. Go ahead.
You got it.
Oh, I got to do that.
Slides. I'm from Capital One. I'm Michelle Chan, and I'm also a technical lead for Scala at Capital One, and I'm a maintainer of Morphir and Morphir Scala.
Oh, you introduced Damien. So one of our co-developers here couldn't make it because he's out in Texas. So Michelle will introduce him.
Yeah, so this is Damian Reeves. He's spoken at FINOS before. He is also from Capital One. He's a maintainer of Morphir, and he's very active in the FINOS community. So I'm sure some of you guys have know him.
Hey, I'm Nick Kolba. I'm a co-founder and CEO at Connectifi, which is an integration interoperability cloud-native company. It's also founder, maintainer, and FINOS contributor for FDC3. And this is all about integration of FDC3 with Morphir, so it's pretty exciting because we are using this kind of cloud-native technique to do that.
Yeah, so we're going to start off with what our challenge was. So we wanted to create a full front-to-back application with the least amount of code possible. And also, I'm sure you guys know about TraderX, which is for trading systems. Well, here at Capital One, we are not a trading company, so we wanted to create something similar, but for commercial banks. And we thought it would be a great collaboration to use Morphir-based applications with FDC3.
Yeah, and just a quick note. So a really big motivator here from the FDC3 side was to really look at how do we expand the use cases that FDC3 can address. For those of you familiar with FDC3, and I see some of you in the audience, you've probably seen a lot of the same demos of FDC3 over and over again, of kind of like broadcasting between, let's say, a grid and a chart or something of this nature. We really wanted to dig into a very different set of use cases, define new intents, define new context data to map these out, and to kind of open up more of the imagination around what we can do with this protocol, with this technology. And yeah, so that's what we're going to show you.
All right, so to give some background on the Morphir side of this. So Morphir is a technology for sharing business logic. And so naturally we thought, if we're going to cut down the amount of code and make it easy for developers, because that's really what we're after making this as easy as possible for developers to build applications. And if we're going to just concentrate on what is the most important thing about an application, it really is the business logic. That's why the whole application exists. So all the database stuff, all the microservices stuff, that's all side information. But if we want to just focus on what is important to the developer, it is the business logic, and that's what Morphir gives us. So Morphir takes a representation of that business logic. It can take it from a couple of different programming languages. It is a pure programming language. It's not a DSL, so these are real programming languages. It captures that into a data format, and then it does useful things with that. So some of the useful things it does are that it generates documentation, it generates interactive documentation, so you can kind of debug and understand what the application is doing. And it also generates integration hooks, so things that we can integrate with other things. So that's where the FDC3 comes in. So the way that we approached this was we just declared the minimum amount of business logic to define what different banks are doing to accept a purchase request and return terms for like a credit card set of terms or credit terms. And we coded that up in the minimum amount of business logic. And then we took that information, we handed it off to Nick, and he integrated with that.
Yeah, and in a similar way that Morphir is a standard language for business logic, FDC3 is a standard language for interoperability at the application layer. So generally, this means the front end of the application, what we're doing ultimately in a parallel way to Morphir is we're eliminating a lot of the complexity that otherwise would go into creating applications, because a lot of that complexity has to do with how the application integrates with other things. Typically, though, FDC3 has been very identified with front office use cases and with very much kind of on the desktop end user experience. And what we wanted to do with this was also kind of get these two to meet in the middle so that we have FDC3 moving more towards addressing middle office, addressing end user experience, but in a different way. And we think the two of these combined produce a much better developer experience, allows you to create complex and high value workflows very quickly. And so I think we should talk more about how we did it.
Yeah, and combining together, we created BankerX.
All right, so what we started out with, this very attractive slide here, is just the business logic. We took the code, we took 3 banks and represented what they would do to respond to a purchase request. And out of that code, we generated what is called the intent schemas that FDC3 uses. And so that was the integration point between the services. So on the Morphir side, we're representing the server side of this application, where the business logic actually executes. And we generated the bits for the UI to integrate with, and that's the FD3 side. And then we generated the runtime. And so, again, we just started with pure business logic, and we generated serverless, in this case, serverless runtime, and deployed that out to the cloud. And Michelle, do you want to describe how that works?
Yeah, so we used AWS Lambda in this case, since Capital One is one of user of AWS, so that's what we knew. So we use CDK. We created using Tapier, which is a language where you can define your REST APIs. We made servers for the FDC3 side, and we also put our Morphir API on there. And then using CDK, we defined the handler to point at that application, and we deployed that to Lambda.
Right, and so for those of you who didn't follow all of that, including myself, that is probably not stuff that you really want to do or think about. And so that is the bit of code, or that is the bit of this application that we want to wrap up and automate. And it was I think very easy to do in this case, to be able to take just pure business logic and turn it into functions that can deploy into the cloud. And so we were able to wrap this up and automate that process, and then hand the hooks over to FDC3.
Yeah, so you want to go to the next slide? So what's really cool here, I mean, and we talked a little bit about the use case, you'll see in a minute, but it's kind of like a mini auction, right? So we have the end user, is very happy, about to buy something, who basically is in some sort of purchasing app, and that app is going to use FDC3 to send a request for terms based on the purchase to any number of bank services that are running out in these serverless Lambdas out in the cloud. This is all mitigated through, for the sake of just rapidly putting this together as a demo, through an interop service, in this case running in Connectifi, but this could be any service that can go between FDC3 and REST. But what's unique about this, besides the use case and the use of Morphir, is that you're going from FDC3 to REST and back to FDC3 in a very seamless way. So we go to the next slide. We can see kind of what this is, the kind of flows on the FDC3 side. So from the purchase app, we're actually calling find intent for get terms. That's going to then return from the directory all of the apps. In this case, they're just, again, Lambdas, services running in the cloud. It returns a list of those. And then for each one, we actually raise an intent targeted to that app to get the terms from it. And then we build that into a kind of a custom resolver UI. that we render for the end user to be able, basically be able then to pick which offer they want to take, and then they pick that one, and that raises the intent make purchase to that particular app, and that app executes the purchase and returns a confirmation. So we kind of created a few novel FDC3 vocabularies here for get terms, make purchase, and the data flows between them. If you want to go to the next slide, this is, for those of you who love TypeScript, here you go. We have, basically, you can see these are mostly normal FDC3 kind of objects, context data objects. They have a type. The only thing that's a little different here that was kind of interesting is that we ended up putting the data into a separate bucket or container for that. This has to do with some issues around the use of the label type and when it gets over to the Morphir side. So that's actually something to think about for the future as we think about context data, and should be using a property name as a kind of overloaded as type as that essential thing. But basically we have purchase, we have terms, there's a provider. If you go to the next slide, I think we can see this is for the get terms intent. So basically that, then you have the make purchase intent. These are all intents that return data. Forgot to mention that, which was a feature that's a 2.0 feature. So this, the purchase returns a purchase confirmation, get terms returned a terms object. So all these things, kind of come together to build this workflow.
Yeah, so the reason this is important, and the reason we're showing this, is because this is what FDC3 uses to drive the behavior of the application and to drive, who responds to what parts or what requests in the application. At the same time, this is the data that needs to go to the server. And so we automated the whole thing. That's the whole point, is that we have a handshake between the server and the UI, which also happens to be using the same data structures that the UI is using. And so that handshake is guaranteed to work. There will be no issues or anything like that. It's just,
they're using the same data. And that's, again, I just want to underscore that this is, so it's kind of like the same vision of FDC3 and the desktop app world, but now going between a front end running in browser and services running in the cloud. And in the same sort of pluggability and the standardization that doesn't require bilateral agreements between each thing.
Right, and I think that extends the providers to an intent from being within the application, which is historically the way it's been, to being outside, to being being able to hook into services running a lot out. And so banks are, you could imagine banks being able to register themselves as a provider for these purchase requests and dynamically being able to add themselves and remove themselves.
Right.
All right, so this is the insight page. Usually I do this live, but we're doing this in a slide. One of the advantages to using Morphir in this case is it gives you full transparency into the logic that's actually happening in your application. So on the server side, what we're looking at is the sequence of steps that went into making a decision about what terms we would make. So one of our banks basically had the logic in there that said, if the category is home or the category is groceries, we will give extra points. So you can see over on the right here that the graph that says if it's groceries, you get 5 times the points. If it's home, you get 2 times the points. Otherwise, you just get the same amount of points. And in this case, because the request came in as home, we see that it went to the blue arrow went to the 2 times. So on the Morphir development app, you can actually go in and play with these. So this is a great way to debug your application and understand how your application is supposed to work. You can go in and play with the numbers, or your business users can go in and play with those numbers in this kind of interactive app, and then save them as test cases. And so build up exactly how the application is supposed to run, save them as test cases, and then we can run that in subsequent builds.
Yeah, so here is our demo, so if you want to show us.
Okay, cool. That is not the demo. Okay, so what we have here, this is just running in browser. So FDC3 in browser, for those of you that know about that. This is actually deployed on the as a GitHub page, so you can actually just hit this, and we have an open source repo. The information will be at the end. Forget about the cheese. That's all just a decoy. That's actually just an image. But this is our hypocritical purchase environment. Here we're connected into a service that provides the FDC3 functionality and connects back to the Morphir services. So when I hit start purchase, what's going to happen is that flow I described earlier, where it's going to call find intents to find what services are available, and then it will return basically a UI for me to choose which ones I want. And of course, because it's a demo, the lambdas have to wake up. There they are. Nice. Okay. Okay, there we go. So we got back, so again, we found intents for get terms, and then for each one that we got back, we then request the terms specifically from each of those, and then display the information coming back for the terms from each one that's running in each different lambda. For each represented bank, it's running through the Morphir logic that Stephen described earlier in order to determine what it wants to do. So it's kind of like a mini auction for this particular user about to purchase a lot of expensive cheese. And so if I choose one, it's now going to let me click through, and that's going to send the other make purchase intent directed at that service that it just perceives as an app, and then get back the result, and it's rendering the result there as a UI, and then we're good to go. Just to replay that, show you there's no man behind the curtain. If Damien or Steven were to turn off one of these services right now, which unfortunately we should have thought of doing in this demo, it would disappear from that option list. If they added a new one, it would appear in that option list. It's completely dynamic in terms of how that's built.
Actually, can you go back to the start purchase?
Yeah.
You can see which one has the 5 times rule in there with the 500 points.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a very simple example, but we hope the concepts are exciting for people and interesting in terms of bringing these things together and trying to explore new use cases for both FDC3 and Morphir. I think we got like about 11 minutes and change.
Go back to the slides.
So we have to go back to the slides. Yeah, sorry, Michelle's right. We clearly rehearsed this extensively.
Yeah, so thank you all for attending our talk. So here we have the links for the repos, where you can find more information about this. And we have a QR code for the BankerX GitHub repo. So if you want to contribute or you want to try it out for your commercial bank, then feel free. And at the bottom, we also have a link to the web application we just showed. So any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Nick. So I understand that some of the stuff we're doing here is a little controversial in the FDC3 world.
Yeah, it's we didn't rehearse that at all, but I wouldn't say controversial, but it's definitely breaking new ground for FDC3 in terms of both FDC3 running in web here, as well as FDC3 from a front end running in browser connecting to services that are playing along as apps. They're represented as apps. So this is definitely something that is, while it's using the FDC3 spec, it's an implementation that I would say the spec didn't originally anticipate. A couple other things I would point out here too that are kind of interesting is that if you were running also a application on the desktop that was registered in this directory that also implemented those intents and registered for them, that desktop-bound app would appear in that resolver window, right? So you would have a mix of both things that are running on the end user's desktop as well as services running in cloud being presented to the end user as equally valid options, which they should be. So I think that those are exciting new concepts for us to introduce into FDC3. Oh, over there.
Is this currently in production or close to being in production in the financial institutions?
Oh, so the question is this close to being in production and which, do you mean the technologies? And yeah, the question is this close to being in production? So the demo that we saw, it's deployed, it's in the cloud, but it's completely fake in the sense that the cheese is not real, that's an image. Sorry, it's true. But and also the services are just mocked up, right? And obviously it's not making real purchases. The Morphir itself is in production, correct?
That is right.
Both at Morgan Stanley and at Capital One?
Almost.
Almost. It's good enough. It's good enough for OSSF. And FTC3 is in production in many places. So yeah, these all, including the tech that we saw here. So all the things are productionizable. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, for BankerX, we wanted to showcase that people were able to do this. And if you want to download it and use it for, like, if you're doing accounting at your bank, then this is a great way to start.
Yeah, so we should highlight another FINOS project, TraderX, this is what we base BankerX on. So TraderX is a sample application built for an investment bank for the trading side. Kind of showing how you would build a trading application in a bank, and then teams are building upon it and creating new ideas. So it's a very dynamic and interesting project. We wanted to do the same on the banking side. So less about trading and more about purchasing things and interest rates and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, and if you're interested in TraderX, they're doing demos in the next room.
So better go fast because it's almost over.
Are there other questions? Because, yeah.
Has anyone done the middle case? This is like retail banking, that's commercial trading, doing commercial lending?
That's a great question. The question is, has anybody done commercial lending with this? Not that I know of, but I think that would be a great application. I mean, this is literally like we put this together to demonstrate the possibility of these use cases. And so now that we've put that out there, it would be great for people, if you have use cases, to come back to us, because what we'd really like to do is to take different vocabularies and workflows that people want to execute that aren't limited to just front office things, but middle office, back office, things that cut across the whole gamut, and to be able to model those out in a similar way. I do want to actually just kind of pontificate for a minute, on a point that Stephen and Michelle both brought up earlier, which is around the developer experience side of it. I think it's really, like, one of the things that was really exciting for me about this process, besides just getting together with other teams at FINOS and kind of working through this problem, was how easy it was to do. Like the developer experience of putting this together was very, very rapid. We really built this on and off in the matter of a few days. But in terms of the process, Steve and Damien and I got together at the FINOS office downtown with Carl, and if Carl's here, thank you very much for facilitating that. And we kind of worked through this flow. We spent like a couple of hours with a whiteboard working through the flow, kind of outlining what the context, data, and intents would look like for this thing. And then from there, we kind of just wrote up what that would look like in terms of JSON in a rough way. I was then able to very quickly mock up the FDC3 front end, which I did originally just all as flat HTML applications that return dummy data. I think I wrote all of that on a plane using the plane Wi-Fi, which was fun. And then then I handed off that to Damien and Steve and Michelle, and they just built the Morphir side, and then we stuck them together yesterday. And there was like a little bit of back and forth and sticking it together and make sure we had the endpoints right, but that was pretty much it. And now we have something that's not only a great demonstration of this use case, but it's actually just running on the cloud and anybody can access. And I think that kind of level of accessibility is really important for all these communities at FINOS.
Yeah, I'm just going to summarize by looking at a little code, because what else would anybody want to do, really? But this is the bank code. So you can see here, here's the logic about multiplying by 5 points, etc. That is it. Like, so there's no cloud code in there. There's no how to, serverless code really. Oops. And here's the definition of the terms, of the bank terms, and then the purchase. So that was it. That's all we had to do to make these things hook up with a lot of automation, generate code generation and everything added. And that's really what we're aiming at, is getting the developer experience to just, here's the data that I need to run my application. Here's the logic of my application. I'm done with my part. Let me generate the rest, and all the rest is automated, whether it goes to serverless or it goes to on a server else somewhere, or runs on the database, whatever. We want to be able to do that. And so I'll leave it with that. I think that summarizes it, that we've taken two FINOS technologies, bound them together, made them work, and we got, I think, a greater whole than the parts. And that's it.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.